Please stand as the Howard University Bison Battalion present colors. They will be followed by Lindsay Reynolds, who will sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light was so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets would glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let's thank the Color Guard and Miss Reynolds for a wonderful rendition. Please welcome to the stage the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Mr. R. Donahue Peebles.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for being here and joining us on this important conference. This is our 46th annual legislative conference. Now, it may surprise you, but this is my 40th participating. So I started young, though, by the way, at 16. We have a exciting and informative discussion that will take place this morning. And we all know that it is timely because America is at a crossroads. And we're going to determine whether we go and continue in a direction of progress or do we revert back. And in terms of African Americans, it's a very important time in our history. And so it's important that we engage in the process of improving the quality of life for African Americans. And so I want to thank you all for being here to lead in that effort. Now, I get the pleasure this morning to introduce someone without whom we would not be here and this conference would not be taking place. Last year, our CEO, she was ill and got sick, was in the emergency room 2 times during this conference last year and worked from the emergency room bed to make sure that we had a great conference. Now, this year, she's in excellent health. She has done an outstanding job in leading the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation throughout this year. She approaches her job and her mission with a business-like focus and moving our agenda forward. And I, as chairperson of the board of directors, I get the great pleasure of working with her and seeing her in action. And so without further discussion, I'd like to introduce to you the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus, Shanice Washington.
Well, thank you, Chairman Peebles, and good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's 46th Annual Legislative Conference. And at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, we envision a world in which all communities have an equal voice in public policy through leadership development, economic empowerment, and civic engagement. And that is why this National Town Hall is one of the signature events for our conference. One of the most important functions of the CBCF is to continually build a pipeline of political, civic, and business leaders, activists, and artist leaders who will bring forth the insights, solutions, and agenda of the diversity of African American communities across this nation and throughout the global Black community. We do this through a number of leadership development programs that we have expanded over the years. Since the inception of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, we have provided firsthand exposure and experience in the work of the Congress and in national policy development for students and fellows from all constituencies represented by the Congressional Black Caucus members. And since our inception, which was 40 years ago, we're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. The CBCF has placed more than 3,000 interns, 100 public policy fellows, and has dispersed more than $11 million in scholarship funds. And I would now like to introduce you to this year's cohort of public policy fellows who are working on solutions to issues that affect our community. Our 2016 fellows are Dr. Richard Ezeki, Transportation and Environmental Sustainability Fellow. He is placed at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation in our Center for Policy Analysis and Research. Mr. Jonathan Riley, our Science and Technology Fellow in the Office of Representative G.K. Butterfield. Ms. Kimberly Toots, Finance Fellow in the Office of Representative Maxine Waters. Abdul Dinsi, Donald M. Payne Foreign Policy Fellow, Office of Representative Karen Bass. Zoe Kador, Energy Fellow, Representative Mark Vesey's office. Priscilla Barber, Energy Fellow, Representative Cedric Richmond's office. Ronald Madlock, Congressional Fellow, Representative Alcee Hastings' office. Mia Keys, Women in Health Sciences Fellow with Representative Robin Kelly, and Aaron Robinson, Inaugural STEM Fellow with Senator Cory Booker. Please join me in giving them a warm round of applause. I encourage you to engage with them, learn about the issues that they are working on, and ask them about the CBCF fellowship opportunity, in case you know someone and/or you may be interested yourself in participating in a future cohort. It is worth repeating by everyone who comes to this podium that we are in a critical moment in American politics and governing. Building a long and high-quality pipeline of leaders of intelligence and integrity is a key ingredient in moving our agenda forward. I applaud you for investing your time and resources to be here this weekend and for participating this week and for participating in this discussion. It signals that you understand your civic responsibility, you have a sense of what's at stake, and you are interested in sharing your insights and perhaps gaining some new insights in the interest of being a part of moving our agenda forward. This will undoubtedly be a lively conversation, one that I know will likely not end before we've heard all the important voices in the room. And I want you to know that this will not be the end of the conversation. Let me thank our sponsor, SEIU, Service Employees International Union, for supporting this event again this year. We truly appreciate your commitment to supporting the CBCF's work. And in a moment, you will hear from Ms. LaTanya Sylvester, who is here representing SEIU, and she will lend some great insights as part of our panel today. So before we get the discussion underway about the agenda for the next administration, it is my absolute great pleasure to introduce Ms. Valerie Jarrett, so we can get some insights from someone in the Obama administration and who's also been very influential in shaping public policy that affects our community. Please give a warm welcome to Senior Advisor of the President of the United States, Ms. Valerie Jarrett.
Well, good morning. I said good morning, everybody. Shawnees, thank you for your leadership, everything you've done for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, not just this week, but every week throughout the year. Don't we appreciate her leadership? Yes, great shout out to the members of the Congressional Black Caucus who you will be hearing from shortly, and for those of them who are busy doing other things this morning, but who serve our country each and every day, I want to express my appreciation to them for their service as well. Round of applause for our elected officials. And to all of you. I can't believe this is my 8th Congressional Black Caucus Foundation week since President Obama was elected nearly 8 years ago. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your support for our president. I want to thank you for your support for our country. Everyone who's here has come to DC. You've left your jobs and responsibilities to be with us here today, unless those of you in the audience are actually here day in and day out. And we appreciate you, because the progress that we've made as a country wouldn't have been possible without your hard work and efforts. So we appreciate you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah? What an 8 years it has been. My goodness. I think people forget sometimes that when President Obama took office, we were losing 850,000 jobs a month. Our unemployment rate skyrocketed up to 10% in the general population, 16.8% in the African American community. And guess where we are today? Under 5% in the general population, 8.1, cut more than half in the African American community. That's progress. But we know we need to do more. Just this week, we had a big announcement about the economy. I want to give you a few facts. In 2015, the average black family income grew faster than any year since 1999, and the African American poverty rate fell faster also than any year since 1999. That's progress. We created 15.1 private sector jobs, the longest private sector job growth spurt in history. In history. That's progress. Everybody's heard about the Affordable Care Act. I like to call it Obamacare. He cares. He cares deeply. For the first time in history, our uninsured rate in the overall country is less than 10%. The uninsured rate for non-elderly African Americans has been cut in half. In half. And I know all of you know folks out there who have been just struggling and are right on the verge of bankruptcy or in bankruptcy because they couldn't pay their medical expenses. Or even worse, they didn't go to a doctor because they were sick. And now we can. And the high school graduation rate for African American students is at its highest point in history. And we know that that is the path to success. So since day one, the president has been focused on equality for all. He wants to make sure that every young child gets that fair shot to achieve his or her dreams. And what I want to talk to you about today are the issues of criminal justice and voting. Two very important issues to the president and two very important issues to the future of our country as you start to map the plan forward when the panel comes up here shortly. So last summer, the president gave a speech at the NAACP, and he talked about criminal justice in the context of three buckets: the community, the courtroom, and the cell block. So what we all know is that what we want to do is avoid any of our folks going into the criminal justice system in the first place. We have spent $80 billion a year on criminal justice. 2.2 million people are incarcerated around our country. 600,000 of them are released each and every year, and far too many go right back in through that revolving door. So what can we do in our community? Everything from early childhood education, ensuring our children are reading, reducing the number of expulsions and suspensions which disproportionately affect boys and girls of color, What can we do to provide summer jobs, that pathway to economic security and independence and law-abiding lives? How can we support diversion programs? I visited a program in Wichita not long ago where these amazing young women who had been brutalized in the course of their life were on a straight trajectory to prison. And then a young African-American woman intervened and saved their lives by wrapping their arms around them. All of us can wrap our arms around our young people. The President's My Brother's Keeper initiative and the work that we're doing with a consortium of foundations for girls and young women of color, all designed to help put our young people on the best possible trajectory. That's the community. We know we also have to strengthen the relationship between police and the communities that they serve, particularly communities of color. And I'm delighted that Brittany Packett's going to be on this next panel. I got to know Brittany because of the work that she did in Ferguson, leading demonstrations for justice. And she served on the President's 21st Century Task Force report that provided a blueprint to law enforcement all over our country to strengthen that bond of trust, because we know that it has broken down. Now, we knew that for a very long time, those of us in this room. But now the country has had a wake-up call as a result of horrendously tragic deaths. And what has come out of that, though, is a movement. And that movement, coupled with work by state, local, and the federal government, we believe can show true progress. And we know we have a long way to go in that arena. So when we talk about the courtroom of our federal criminal justice initiative, we know right now, we hear from judges all around our country about the fact that their hands are tied because of mandatory minimum sentences. And those mandatory minimum sentences are excruciating when you meet the people who have been subjected to them. They are oftentimes arbitrary and overly harsh. And so right now, here in Washington, both the House and the Senate are taking up legislation that would reduce those mandatory minimums. Now, I think you're going to hear from Congressman Scott that the legislation doesn't go far enough. It does not end mass incarceration, and he's absolutely right about that. But it is a step in the right direction. And so we want to galvanize the support that we're seeing. And there's not that many times in Washington where you find the House and the Senate on both sides of the aisle working together constructively. And we want to capitalize that momentum and bring it across the finish line before the President's office leaves office. And we want to make sure that everybody focuses on the human consequences of our current system. President Obama has commuted 673 people's sentences. That's more than the last 8 presidents combined. And for each person whose sentence he commutes, he sends them a letter. And in that letter, he says, I have personally reviewed your record. I believe in you. I believe you have earned a second chance, and that's why I am giving you a second chance. And with that second chance and this letter goes responsibility. And do not disappoint me, because if you do, you're going to make it harder for the next person's sentence who should be commuted. But wouldn't you all agree, rather than commuting sentences on the back end, we ought to be keeping our people out of the system on the front end? Which brings me to my final point on criminal justice, and that is what happens to people while they're incarcerated and afterwards. Just last week, I visited San Quentin Penitentiary, State Penitentiary in the Bay Area. I know Congresswoman Bass is here as well, representing California. And I visited a class of about 100 young men who were learning to code. I don't know how to code. Do you guys know how to code? Not that many people know how to code. And that is an important skill to have in this 21st century, particularly in the Bay Area. There are 3,000 people who volunteer at San Quentin, teaching everything from remedial education to coding, in the hopes that when people are released, that they have the tools that they need to take care of their families and live law-abiding lives. And unless we invest in people and give them those tools, then we can expect nothing other than a high recidivism rate. And it isn't just a swirl of a recidivism rate. Keep in mind that when they come out, if they commit a crime, somebody else is hurt. So the president's view is our efforts actually keep America safer. And they give people that opportunity to get their life back on track. And I was so heartened to see these young men who were absolutely committed to trying to figure out how to make some money and take care of their families, and the employers who are volunteering their services, the people around the Bay Area, are offering these young men jobs as soon as they leave. That should be duplicated all across our country. A couple of months ago, the president announced a Fair Chance business pledge where he is asking the private sector to commit to ban the box. Many of you have heard about them ban the box. Employers ask at the beginning of a job application, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been incarcerated? Well, first of all, when you see that and you have been incarcerated, you hesitate about even applying for the job because you presume it's going to be an important, if not overwhelming, factor in consideration. So we're saying, don't ask that at the front end, ask it at the back end. Give them a chance to prove themselves, to come in and show you why you should hire them. And we are so heartened that literally well over 150 companies from around our country, large companies from Facebook to Google to Pepsi-Cola to Coca-Cola, have all said that they're going to ban the box. And a year ago, it was hard to find a company to come out publicly and say that they hired people who had been incarcerated. So we're seeing momentum in the right direction, and we want to continue that pledge and that momentum that we have already built up. So my final topic for you is voting. So since President Obama took office, 2 of his attorney generals, Eric Holder and now Loretta Lynch, have initiated, yes, a round of applause for 2 rock stars, right? Have initiated over 100 voting rights cases across our country. Where else in the world do people try to make it harder for you to vote? And when you hear people talk about vote fraud, I would like someone to show me any evidence that we have vote fraud at the level that would warrant the kind of restrictions that are being put in place. We simply don't have it. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So just in the last year, we've had great successes in North Carolina and in Texas fighting back these onerous laws, and we're going to continue that hard work. But here's where you come in. You also have to vote. And I don't care how hard it is to vote. You have to vote. It is the most important civic responsibility that you have, and it's something that many people sacrificed and died for in order for us to have, and every single person, and I don't just mean voting for president, which can be exciting and whatever. I mean vote for the state's attorney who's going to make prosecutorial decisions in your community. Vote for the governor. Vote for the legislature that draws the boundaries that determine how well you are represented. Do your homework. Vote for the judges that are going to be overseeing your cases. There's a lot that every single person can do, and we want engagement. The president started his career, as I think everybody now knows, as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago, my hometown. Chicago in the house? I think there must be some Chicago in the house. And he did it because he believed that the voice of the people, the ordinary person, could make a difference. And when one person makes a difference, 2 and 3, and then a room, and then a community, and then a city and a state, and the entire country. And every bit of progress that we have made in our country has been up against the entrenched status quo. And the only way that we can fight that entrenched status quo is if you and your neighbors and your family get engaged. And so as the president's term sunsets, sad as I am to say goodbye, as he often says, did any of you guys see the little video of the young girl who was crying, too soon, I can't believe you're leaving? I showed the president the video, and he said, call her up and tell her that come January 20th, I will occupy the most important office in our country, and that is the office of citizen. And you all already have that office. And so we expect big things from you in the future as we turn the baton over, but mostly we turn the baton over to you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Please welcome the co-chairs of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's 46th Annual Legislative Conference, Representative Karen Bass from the state of California, and Representative Lacey Clay from the state of Missouri.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? I want to welcome you here to the 46th Annual Legislative Conference. It is amazing to think that it has been that many years. I am proud to serve as the co-chair representing the Congressional Black Caucus, along with my colleague, Representative Lacey Clay. And so our theme for this year is defining the moment and building the movement. So what is our moment? The first time in U.S. history, an African-American president. We are finishing 8 years. It is amazing to think that he has been our president for 8 years. Building the movement, if you think about it, whenever we have had significant change in our country, it has taken a movement to bring about that change. Am I right?
Yes.
If we think about our theme for the town hall, defining the Black agenda for the next administration, we cannot wait. Personally, I have faith in the American people that it is going to turn out the way it must turn out in November, because we are going to turn out, because we are going to make it happen. And so we can't wait until next year or the year after to talk about what do we want to see in the next administration. We have to get busy with that now. I want to call your attention to the policy agenda for the Congressional Black Caucus. Many of you have received this document. This is a one-page summary summarizing our policy agenda. If you don't have it on your chairs now, you can get it as you leave the auditorium today. You can also go to the website for the Congressional Black Caucus. So you will see the issues that we are working on. And what we hope to hear from you today is where you think we need to continue to do. We have to get busy, we have to build that movement, and we have to define the next moment for our next time period. Thank you so much, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, and I couldn't agree with you more. You represent Southern California. I represent Missouri. And Chairman Butterfield represents North Carolina, who will join us later. But these are three different regions of the country where we can very easily identify the dreams and the challenges our constituents have in common. We have a great opportunity right now to discuss and define the most pertinent policy issues that will be key in the upcoming election cycle, and to form a collective agenda that we can wield as a very powerful voting bloc. So are you all ready to dive into these issues this morning? You set? We're set too. Great. And I'm eager to hear what this exchange will develop today. And from a very seasoned panel, and I look forward to hearing what you in the audience will add. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of the 46th Annual Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, ALC, and welcome. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our moderator for today's discussion, journalist, author, White House correspondent, and Washington Bureau Chief for American Urban Radio Network, Miss April Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. You can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. What's on the table should excite you this morning. Good morning. It's good to be here with all of you beautiful people in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., as we are preparing for the next president of the United States, number 45. This is a very interesting and exciting time in the nation's capital. Here for this 46th annual CBC session, I'm April Ryan, your moderator for the morning, White House correspondent in Washington, bureau chief for the American Urban Radio Networks. I've been at the White House for 20 years January, covering 3 presidents, and I'm telling you, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat like many of you, wondering which one will be the next president. But there's a lot at stake when we talk about number 45, and that's why we are here this morning. Do you agree there's a lot at stake? There is, again, a lot at stake, and these seats should not be empty. There is a lot at stake in your community, in your state, and in this nation. I mean, just last night, what did we hear? We heard about a 13-year-old killed by a police officer in Ohio. Just this morning, we got an alert that Sandra Bland's family settled for $1.9 million. That's one of the big issues right now, police-involved shootings. A lot at stake. Another issue at stake, we've got the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. A lot at stake. We've got issues of education. Our kids are being expelled at young ages from preschool. We've got a lot at stake. We have a lot of kids who are doing better in school, but are they going on to college? We have a lot at stake. When you talk about healthcare, the Affordable Care Act, better known as what? Obamacare. It could either stay and be tweaked or someone to defund it and make it go away. We have a lot at stake. And then we talk about criminal justice. We talk about judges who cannot get a confirmation hearing. We have a lot at stake. And once again, we are here talking about the Black agenda for the next administration, what is at stake. So I want you all to participate with me. I want you all to be interactive. I want you all to help me break Twitter today, okay? I like trending. So let me see all your phones, your new iPhone 7 and all those other, the Samsungs. Let me see all your devices. I want you right now to start tweeting the hashtag, and remember this throughout this whole session. If you hear something impacting or you just think someone looks good, tweet it out. The hashtag is CBCFALC16. Let's do it again. Hashtag CBCFALC16. I want to see those. And we're also, if you have a question from the crowd, we're going to ask you to come to that microphone. But if you have a question as well, you can also put my name next to it, at April D. Ryan, and I may ask one of the panelists one of your questions. So once again, what's at stake? A lot's at stake. And let's bring on our distinguished panel to talk about what's at stake. And also, we're going to talk about what's at stake, but also possible solutions to help fix this problem that all stems a lot of times around race, the evolution of the problem and fixing the problem so the next president can help us move forward. All right. We would like to bring to the stage Representative Robert C. Scott, Ranking Member of the Education and Workforce Committee. Let's give Congressman Scott a big round of applause. One of my favorite congresspeople. Next up, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, nationally recognized economist, author, commentator, and President Emerita of Bennett College for Women. Let's give her a big round of applause. Brittany Packnett, Vice President, National Community Alliance's Teach for America. Give her a big round of applause. Latanja Sylvester, President, Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 21, Louisiana. Let's give her a big round of applause. And remember, this National Town Hall is sponsored by the Service Employees International Union. Next up, Dr. Melina Abdullah, Professor and Chair, Pan-African Studies Department, California State University, Los Angeles, and leadership team member of the Black Lives Matter movement. Let's give her a big round of applause. Up next, Mark Morial, President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Urban League. Jamal Miller, our final panelist, Deputy Director, Office of Health Equity, California Department of Public Health. And once again, let's start hashtagging, and even to my panelists, if you have your devices with you, the hashtag is, once again, the audience knows, the hashtag is hashtag CBCFALC16. Hashtag CBCFALC16. Well, at this time, I'm going to move to my seat. And can you hear me? Maybe not. Not yet. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, good, you can hear me. All right, so we're going to talk about something that we just talked about a moment ago. Issues of Black Lives Matter. That's a real issue right now. That's a real issue. And many people connect Black Lives Matter to the issue many decades ago of Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, Black Power. When we say Black Lives Matter, are we saying just Black Lives Matter or all lives matter? But at this particular time, we need to focus in on the issue of Black Lives Matter.
I think that it's really important that we give ourselves permission to uplift the specific ways that Black people experience oppression in this country. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, what we're doing is acknowledging the positioning of Black people, right? So Black people, we find ourselves at the bottom of every possible social and economic and political measure. So we are absolutely addressing the second wave of lynching that we're facing. In fact, Black people are killed by the police now more than during the first lynching era. And so we're lifting that up. We are talking about the ways in which Black people find themselves unemployed and underemployed at rates that are consistent, and Dr. Malveaux will talk more to this, I'm sure, that are consistent throughout our history. We are still double the rate of everyone else. And so when we say Black Lives Matter, we are talking about the conditions that Black people face in an America that is still extremely racist and oppressive to Black people. So we don't have to justify it. We don't have to say that, you know, everyone else's life matters. Of course, that's a given. What the history of the United States is that Black people's lives have not been valued, and it's been on our backs this country has been built. I just want to close this comment by recognizing that even in the Congressional Black Caucus annual gathering, we opened, all of us were backstage kind of in awe that we opened this with a national anthem that is not ours and that is hugely oppressive to Black people. And so when we know better, we do better. So my prayer and hope and affirmation is that in the years to come and in the events to follow, we won't do that anymore. We won't do that anymore.
And that's a very big point right now with what we're seeing with the NFL and the gentleman from San
Colin
Francisco.
Kaepernick.
Yeah.
49ers fan right here. I'm from Oakland, so.
But that's saying a lot.
April, if I could just piggyback on that. Let's go back just 2 days. Let's go back to Tuesday when, the 13th, when we learned the new economic numbers, which were exciting numbers. It was a great coup for President Obama for us to learn that poverty went down by a whole point, that incomes are not only ticking up, went up by 5%. But I watched everybody, CNN, nobody out of their lips came the word but Black incomes, which remain stagnant.
Right.
That Black poverty, which is still much higher, it's 24%. Overall poverty went down by a percentage, but Black poverty, but that means 1 in 4. Guys, that means 1 in 4. So let me put it this way, whiteness is a powerful PR machine. Now, I stole that quote from a young sister who's a professor at Agnes Scott College, Professor Hall. And she said that whiteness is a powerful PR machine because we are not affirmed. Because when you look at walls, when you go to certain museums, I was at the National Gallery of Art the other week, no Black people on the walls. I asked the docent, she said, oh, but Black people weren't painting back then.
I saw your Facebook page.
I was so mad. However, there was one Black picture, and she could point me to the one, it was Archibald Motley's grandmother. that one picture, and Representative Scott, loving you as I do, I will tell you that I would like you and the members look at the appropriation that the National Art Gallery gets. It's not a Smithsonian museum, but it's a museum that gets an appropriation every year from our Congress. But the point is this: we have not insisted on our space. Black Lives Matter insists upon our space. It insists upon our recognition. It does not mean that all lives do not matter. All lives have always mattered. This is the first time since the good old days of the Black Panther Party. We want freedom, we want the power to determine our destiny. This is the first time that black folks as a generation, I love the Black Lives Matter young people, because essentially they took it from the baby boom, passed over those Gen Xers who were a little bit passive, and took it to the next level with the millennials to say Black Lives Matter, and we insist on our space, we insist on our recognition, we deserve it, and we will not step back.
And let me, yes, you can clap. And what I want to say is, and I thank you for your points, and I want to say this: Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, blue lives matter, but at this particular time when we continue to see our children, our cousins, our fathers, our brothers and sisters, yes, our lives matter, and I am Black.
Can I add to that very quickly, just to really clarify the sense of urgency, right? Because I work for Teach for America full time, but I'm a Ferguson protester, protested all over this country. I'm a member of the movement. We've been talking backstage. And let's be very clear. A young man named Tyree King was just killed by Columbus, Ohio police officers last night. 13 years old, carrying a BB gun.
In Ohio, Cleveland, we just saw Tamir Rice
just
a couple of years ago.
And 2 years ago,
with a toy gun.
the grand jury 2 years ago failed to indict the officer that killed John Crawford while he was carrying a gun in a Walmart in an open carry state, right? So absolutely, we cannot equivocate the fact that Black Lives Matter. And just to make sure that we have a real sense of urgency about this didn't happen yesterday, and this isn't just happening to one person. This issue is systemic, and it happened just last night.
But this issue
every day.
But this issue of policing, this issue of bad policing has been going on since, and let's get this clear, since we have been in this country, since we were first in this country. And the problem is that it was never captured on videotape. Now there's the visual, the accountability component. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's a start. And I want to go to Congressman, one of my favorite Congresspeople, Congressman Scott. You used to sit on the Justice Committee. Now, could you talk to me about the issue of Black Lives Matter? When we talk about this, the accountability component, because we're now seeing the visuals that, many outside of our community thought it was a myth that we were always talking about, but now they have to succumb and say, yes, I do see this, I've seen this. Even if they come up with some other kind of way or why it happened, they do see that this is our reality. When we talk about the accountability component, it does need to be strengthened. The issues of police storage, the video storage, correct? And also the fact that there are police departments that don't necessarily have to or don't want to have the cameras. Why? Tell us how would that loophole close?
Well, the first thing we needed to do is to get the data. And a year and a half ago, I introduced legislation that passed a year and a half ago to actually collect the data. We don't have a complete list of all of the deaths in custody. That is, deaths in the process of arrest, but also deaths in jails and in prisons. And if we get that data, we'll be able to analyze it to make an intelligent decisions about exactly what can we do to avoid preventable deaths. So collecting that data is the first step. The other is the accountability. Most of the solution will be on the prevention side. Waiting until after a police shooting and then trying to figure out what to do. You have the civil justice system. Many people are getting settlements on the civil side, but it is very difficult, and it will always be very difficult, to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt that a police officer was not afraid when you only have his side of the story to begin with. And that's always going to be problematic. One of the things you can do is to make sure you're electing prosecutors. One of the most recent police convictions was in my district. We elected a couple of years ago a young African-American woman as prosecutor, and she brought the case and won it against a police officer. So you have to make the political system work, you can't sleep through an election and then think the people are going to have your best interest at heart. Police training is extremely important to make sure that after the political system works, and who polices and how they police are basically political decisions. You elect the city government, they appoint the chief of police, they decide who gets to police and who doesn't. But there are training that can deal with de-escalation of situations, implicit bias, how to police without profiling. There are a lot of things you can do to help police learn how to police without many of these problems. But there's also legislation pending that will add accountability to the police, having police departments certified as coming up to standards. So there's a lot on the legislative agenda that can improve the situation, but the first thing you have to do is to collect the data.
So,
Yes, and I wanted
good
to-
morning, everyone. And I just want to further on it. See, we all know the issue is lack of accountability.
And wait a minute, let's before we go to Mr. Morial, let's talk about who he is. You are the head of the National Urban League, but you were also a mayor of New Orleans.
Yeah, and
Louisiana.
I was a mayor proudly that reformed the police department, right? That went from having the highest number of civil rights complaints in the country almost down to none. So if the will of elected officials and mayors and police chiefs is there, you can fix a police department. If you don't have any courage, if you don't have any will, then the status quo will maintain. But I was going to say this. 100 years ago, when lynching was an epidemic and a problem in this country, the response and the outrage was directed at passing an anti-lynching law through the Congress. Today, the law, the civil rights law that is designed to hold police officers accountable, is 100 years old, stale, outmoded, doesn't work, and needs to be updated. And we need new tools, and we have to put the will and the outrage behind. We want to change the system so that police officers can be held accountable. There's too wide a discretion, and that discretion, we've seen it play out. It played out in Ferguson with the actions of the prosecutors. It played out in Baltimore with the actions of, well, the judge in that case. That case ended up with an indictment. It's played out time and time again. Here we are 2 years after the choke death of Eric Garner in New York, and there's still an ongoing federal investigation. Now, anyone
he said he could
who
not
saw
breathe
that,
11 times. He said, I cannot breathe 11 times.
Yeah, and so what I want to make sure, and this is, this is a role we play, is that we want to make sure that we focus on the demands and the reforms that we need to address this problem and address this issue. Because the outrage is real. These police incidents have been going on for years. It's just that now they're captured on social media. And our outrage, so in the Congress, in the next Congress, we are going to be pushing for changes in legislation to change the standard by which police officers can be prosecuted in the federal system. And we have to push that. Without that, we're going to face the same situation. I know that local prosecutors in many instances don't have the will. It's not a blanket indictment of all local prosecutors. The will, and they have a conflict with the police in terms of having to work for the police. So that is never going to be the best remedy. The best remedy is to get a new federal law which empowers local U.S. attorneys in the federal Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, to bring cases. So I believe that in this environment with the Congressional Black Caucus, where this is a legislative policy weekend, the strength is that we have to use our political movement, whether it's protest politics, whether it's advocacy politics, behind the distinct demands and changes we need to address this problem and so many other problems that we face in this country.
April, I'd like to jump in and pivot from a public health and health equity perspective to talk about something that is subtle, but yet is potent with regard to political incorporation and civic engagement within the Black community. There's a Black Lives Matter study that identifies that from the year of 1970 to 2004, there were over 2 million preventable deaths in the African American community. This researcher, Dr. Javier Rodriguez, out of the University of Michigan, identified the implications of this with regard to the U.S. electorate in 2004. So of those 2 million lives, roughly 1.7 million people would have been alive in 2004 with regard to the Kerry and Bush election. Of those 1.7 million, based on voter participation rate, roughly 1.3 million people, African American people, would have participated in the election in 2004. So with regard to those preventable deaths, if they had voted in 2004, had been alive to vote and exercise their constitutional right, John Kerry would have gotten 900,000 more votes in the 2004 U.S. election, and George Bush would have benefited, but he would have only benefited to the tune of 100,000 more votes. So that would have turned over the presidential election, and it also, from that period of time from 1970 to 2004, would have overturned 7 state Senate races, and it also would have overturned 11 gubernatorial races. The reason I bring that up is because Black Lives Matter, particularly within the context of civic engagement as a key social determinant of health. Yeah. So it's very important that we talk about, from a police brutality and violence standpoint, the implications of Black Lives Matter, but we also need to be very explicit in understanding the broader but yet subtle implications of why we need to exercise our ability to be civically engaged and vote, because 18% of our GDP is invested in health and human services. The people that we elect to go and represent us at a state, federal, city, and county level make significant decisions with regard to our health outcomes, life expectancy, and quality of life. So even though we see voting and political incorporation as a non-health essential, it very much so is a downstream health essential when we think about how it affects our quality of life and life expectancy. So that's just a pivot and another take on how Black Lives Matter within the political context.
And I appreciate that. Yes, let's give him a big round of applause. That's a very interesting component and a different twist, but it's very relevant to what we're talking about. And I want to throw something out here, and any of you can comment. I don't know how many of you saw the data from the Washington Post article. 990 deaths in the hands of police last year. And African Americans were more likely than any other group to die at the hands of police. The Washington Post, the standard for many people here in this town and across the nation, the Standard News organization, they saw something, and they are tracking the data themselves. They have, in this story, they have all the people who have been killed in police custody. Go back and look it up. It's something called 990. Yeah, it's in the Washington Post. Look it up. It's data. But when we talk about this friction with the community, our community and police, I learned something from Homeland Security head Jay Johnson not long ago. It was actually the day of the funeral in Dallas for the police officer, the memorial service. He said, when there is this type of friction between the community and policing, it's a national security issue. Mm-hmm. Again, when there is a breach between the community and law enforcement, it's a national security issue. Why? Because the trust is broken. Mm-hmm. They can't rely on you, and you can't rely on them. I'm going to throw that out there.
So, a couple of things, right? And the Washington Post, to be clear, tracked the shootings of people by police, right? Yeah. The number is actually closer to 1,200 when you look either at the Guardian's The Counted tracking or a group that I'm a part of called Mapping Police Violence, because let's be clear, before the government was pushed to do this, and I'm thankful that they finally are, before mainstream news media outlets were doing it, it was the citizens, it was the people that were tracking these numbers. So it was actually closer to 1,200, and Black folks last year were 3 times as likely to be killed by police, either by being shot, by an in custody death like we saw with Sandra Bland or something of the like. But what I think is critically important is that we do not let people off of the hook in talking simply about trust. People want to talk just about relationships. People want to talk just about community police relations as if you handing me an ice cream cone is going to save my life, right? Ice cream is nice, and I told the Washington Post this the other day. Ice cream is nice, you not killing us is better, right? I will trust you. I will trust you when you treat me like a human being, right? When you are trained in certain ways and when you are held accountable for your actions. And so at the end of the day, we build trust with one another by doing what we say we're going to do. And if what you say you're going to do is to serve and protect me, then that's what you have to do. Otherwise, you don't get to do it anymore. You derive your power as a public servant, whether it's a police officer, an elected official, a teacher, whomever, from the people. And so we have to continue to hold that level of accountability, to your point, high, because it's not just about relationships and it's not just about trust. And we can't let people think that they can trick us with that conversation.
You know, trust is something that has to be earned.
That's
and
right.
if you look at African American people and our relationship to institutions in this nation, there is no reason for us to have trust with any institution. I want to take a minute to talk about what Brother Jamal said regarding health. A third of all the kidney failure patients in our nation are African American. Yet insurance companies, even Representative Scott, given HCA, insurance companies are trying to throw people who need dialysis off their rolls so they can go to Medicaid, Medicare. Now, when you talk to them about this, they would tell you this is race neutral. But these are the same insurance companies, the same health insurance industry that did experiments on our men in Tuskegee. So tell me why a lot of folks don't go to the doctor. Because they're not sure whether they're going to be cured or be experimented on. But the notion that these health insurance companies can throw folks off insurance that they've been paying for because they want to save a little money. And that because the Republican Congress has been so recalcitrant, the Congress can't really fix HCA to make it more effective, but more importantly, because it has an economic impact on those families, those African American families who have a kidney failure patient in their home, and if they cannot get private insurance and must get Medicare, Medicaid, they must pay higher copays. They will get a different quality of care. And so why should we trust institutions that have policies that do not demonstrate that they deserve our trust? Why should we trust educational systems that have the University of Missouri that have cotton sitting on the front lawn while black students have to walk by? Why do we not trust, quite frankly, the folks at the Department of Education here in the United States who impose a Parent Plus loan system that caused HBCU land to lose 28,000 students? Should there be trust there? I mean, I have to tell you, again, I'm a 60s child. I see a police car rolling up on my house and I lock the door. I mean, unless I've been robbed, I'm not, come on in, y'all, have some ice cream. I mean, and I didn't do anything. I'm too old to break the law anymore. But I still don't trust anymore.
You can still do it, though.
But I don't trust. And unfortunately, younger people don't trust because they've been walking down the street, rolling down the street, minding their business, been pulled over, been young black men and women made to get on their knees. Did you see that video that Diamond Reynolds took when her fiance was killed? And that man went back to work this week. Excuse me, that man went back to work.
The police
Should
officer.
we trust, the police officer went back to work. Should we trust police departments that say you can kill somebody without provocation? Come on back to work so you can maintain your pension. There is no trust.
Yes. So let me say this. I think there is trust. I think that we can trust the police to do exactly what they were designed to do. But we need to remember where policing in this country comes from, right?
Come on.
Policing in this country evolved out of the system of slave catching, right? So when we understand that, why would we trust the police to protect and serve the black people whose ancestors, our ancestors, were captured and returned to their alleged owners by these same people that we're now told to trust with our lives? Oh no. That's why we're standing up. That's why we're saying it's more than accountability, right? The system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. There is no failure in the system. The system was intentionally created to act in this way.
Okay,
and so this is why there's a limitation. We have to do policy work, but there's also a limitation in policy work. That's why the organizing in the streets has to continue to happen. We have to rise up and recognize that, you know, the 1,200 people who were killed by police are going to continue to be killed by police as long as we invest in a policing system that oppresses us. What we need to do is divest from this kind of oppressive policing and invest in what actually makes communities safe. Livable wage jobs, mental health resources, after-school programs, permanent housing, the things that we actually need to build safe communities. And so police are doing what they are designed to do.
Dr. Abdullah, thanks. This is a hot panel discussion, but I believe what I do take from that, I believe you're absolutely right, and you kind of teed up for the next piece. There has to be pressure and leverage for anything to make change. But at the same time, we are in a situation where we need policing, and we have to support the police, but also support the fact that we want to root out bad policing. And that's I believe, that's where this nation is as a whole. And I understand exactly what you're saying about
that's
putting pressure.
one perspective. Many of us know that there are other societies.
I hear you, but I mean, what happens if something happens? You are in a car accident, something happens, you need the police.
Call emergency medical provider.
Yeah, but you call the emergency. No, a car accident. And
I don't need the police.
I hear you. But let me say this to you. We have to find a way for all of us to exist peacefully. And there are good police out there. Many of us have them in our families. Many of us have them as friends. Many of us have them as neighbors. But I agree with you. There is bad policing, and there needs to be pressure on that. And I want to move to the next piece.
April, but the good police have to speak up against the bad police.
True.
They know it better than any of us. They know who their colleagues are who are not worth two days' lives.
You are absolutely right.
They cover up for them.
You are absolutely right.
And it's not an indictment on the individuals, it's an indictment of the system. The system. There are good people that do lots of bad things, right? Because they're tied into a system that's oppressive.
That's right.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the next segment. This is a hot segment. It's amazing. And thank you. I love all the thought and the new perspectives about this. I want to talk next. We're moving into justice and education, health, economics, striking the roots of mass incarceration. Striking the roots of mass incarceration. This is a cyclical process. And I want to start about the economics of it, because education ties into the economics. I want to talk to SEIU as well as the Urban League about this. Let's talk about how education and health all play into, and the economics all play into the downward spiral that lead us into being incarcerated.
Well, thank you. So I am from Louisiana. I live in New Orleans, and Louisiana is the most incarcerated state in the world. So when we talk about mass incarceration, we have to keep in mind that the people that are being incarcerated are the people that are in our communities. 14% of Black people use drugs, but 37% of them are incarcerated because of some affiliation with drugs. So there's always been a disparity as it relates to the Black people in our community and how they've been targeted, systematically targeted for years to create a system now, that an incarceration system that is driven by wealth, that's driven by private prisons, that's making enormous amounts and billions and billions and billions of dollars just by people being incarcerated. I mean, I have a master's degree in criminal justice, and I thought that the whole concept of criminal justice is to reform. There's no reform going on. There's no reentry programs. And then also when people are, released from prison and brought back into our communities, there's no programs put in place to make them whole again. You know, they've served their time, they've given their debt to society, so how do we make them whole again? We don't. They are unemployed. 51% of African American men in New Orleans are unemployed. And New Orleans is a city where we are driven by economics and tourism. But our people, the men in our communities, are unemployed. And that speaks a lot to the education system in our city, where 90% of our schools are now charter schools. There's no autonomy, there's no transparency in the charter system, and our men, as it shows, are not being educated.
Come on.
So, I want to lift up Michelle Alexander and her book, The New Jim Crow, which more than any book in recent times has helped to catalyze an understanding of the problem of mass incarceration. And we should use the term mass incarceration because this is a policy which has led to massive increases, not only in the number of people who are jailed in this country, but the number of people who are jailed for non-violent offenses. Let me tell you what else the mass incarceration strategy and policy and efforts over the years has done. It used to be inside of a prison facility. There were many opportunities for job training, for education, for GEDs, for rehabilitative efforts which were designed to help people reform themselves. Part of the 80s and 90s effort was to attack that. Yes. So states and the federal government passed laws that prevented, that limited, that disabled efforts within the walls of a prison to rehabilitate a person. So the strategy included that. The third thing the strategy included is what I call codicils to the term, codicils to your jail term. Meaning when you got out, you faced, I can't vote, I can't rent a home, I can't get a job, I can't get a cosmetologist license, I can't get a barber's license. It's going to take a tremendous effort to undo what is a broken system. But here's really the point. I think you began to really make this point, and that is, this is an example of misplaced priorities. The states spend between 60 and 80 billion a year on the prison systems operated by the states. Imagine if we could shift half of that money to public education, half of that money to early childhood education, half of that money to summer jobs for young people in America. Suppose we just shifted it. It's a misplaced priority, and we have to follow the money. Right. Because what we've also created, and this is tragic, in Louisiana, there are small towns in Louisiana where the biggest industry and the major employer in the town is a prison facility. Yes. The guards, the people that prepare the food, the people that take care of the grounds, the small businesses that serve the jail. We've created a prison industrial complex. So what we've created is a dependency in these small towns on the economic viability of the jail, right? On the economic viability of the jail. So this is something that it's going to take a lot to undo. Keep this in mind. We're 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's prison population. We incarcerate more people in the United States than were incarcerated during the apartheid regime in South Africa. And those numbers are designed, brothers and sisters, to paint the magnitude of the problem. But I'll come back to what I believe history teaches us. History teaches us that protest movements, political activation, voting, every tool we have at our disposal has to be deployed to raise this issue. So we got an election coming up. For me, not voting isn't an option, right? And I'll tell you why it's not. Because all that's going to do is make somebody else's vote count more. And the people whose vote will count more are not people who want to change the criminal justice system, not people who want to do something about police accountability. They're people who are perfectly fine with the existing status quo. So every dynamic has to be used in order to do this. Now, final note, we run reentry programs at the National Urban League in 19 cities. I'm very proud of them. They're highly successful. But here's the deal. If in Chicago, I've got 40 people in the program, I've got 400 on a waiting list. The investment that we make in this country, there are reentry programs, but they're like a drop of water in a huge ocean. It's not significant enough to address the problem. If we just shifted 10 billion of the 60 to 80 spent to reentry programs, we would be able to change the lives and increase the self-sustainability of so many black men in America. So this problem, this issue, like every problem, we have to work to translate it into positive change. So call the question when you go back to your local jurisdiction. Call the question to legislators, members of Congress, people who want to run. Call the question to those that come to your community and want you to support any initiative. Call the question on what they're going to do and what they can support to try to address these issues.
Mark,
Oh, we can.
when you say
Dr.
men, this is
Malcolm.
a tiny little point because Mark talks about the difference in the lives of black men in America. And I love my brother, we go back, but black women too are affected by this mass incarceration. Sister, the number of African American women who are incarcerated has gone up by 800%. 800%. And half of these sisters are mothers.
And this point well made. It affects black men, it affects black women, brown men, brown women. It affects communities of color more broadly and certainly disproportionately.
We as conscious people, we all woke. So because we woke, we really do need to deal with the fact that we too often sideline the issues that affect African American women, and we are intertwined.
But let me say this, Dr. Malveaux.
And I apologize.
Congressman Scott has been working on legislation. He's been dealing with issues of criminal justice reform, and one of the staunch supporters of changing the dynamic, the disparities. Let's talk about that.
There's one thing that Mark didn't mention in his litany, and that is the incarceration rate is so high that recent studies have shown that it's actually counterproductive, that you've got so many people in jail, children being raised with parents in prison, at high risk of going to prison. People, as you pointed out, with felony records have trouble getting jobs, can't get a job, more likely to be involved in prison. So much of the Justice Department budget being used up for prisons that aren't reducing crime. The studies have shown anywhere up to 500 per 100,000. Anything over that, you're getting virtually no criminal justice benefit. You're just wasting money. That money should be used. Now, over 500 per 100,000. The national average in the United States is not 500 per 100,000. It's over 700 per 100,000. In the black community, over 2,000. Some states lock up African Americans at the rate of 4,000 per 100,000. Anything over 400, counterproductive. And so the money is there. And some states have figured this out. Texas was looking at a $2 billion prison construction requirement at the rate we're going. $2 billion, one state. And somebody suggested, well, if you use that money intelligently, as Mark has indicated, in prevention, early intervention, education, rehabilitation, you might not have to spend all $2 billion. And so they tried that. And they looked up. They didn't have to build any new prisons. In fact, they could close some of the prisons they had. And that has created an interesting coalition because a lot of conservatives are looking at the criminal justice system as just wasting money. And so those who want tax reductions, those who don't like wasting money, have joined the criminal justice reform. And there are specific, we're debating this now as to what we ought to do. You talked about mass incarceration. There's several pending bills, and we want to deal with those that actually reduce mass incarceration. Some will have a significant impact, some not so much at all. You ought to look at the war on drugs, one of the major drivers of this mass incarceration. Are we dealing with the drug problem as a public health problem or adding new penalties? Some add new penalties, some treat it as a mental health problem. The racial disparities, do Black Lives Matter? Are your initiatives reducing the disparities in the criminal justice system, or are they making them worse? And there's one part that I think is important. Are you using evidence and research to make your policy, or just slinging together a bunch of slogans and sound bites that help politicians get elected but won't do anything? Those are the kinds of things that we ought to be evaluating these bills on, and we may be considering them as early as next week. And some of the bills do absolutely nothing in terms of 2.2 million. To get it to 2.1 million, you need 100,000. And if you're talking about single-digit thousands as the impact on mass incarceration, you're just not doing anything. But we know that there are ways, and we know there are strategies that can significantly reduce crime if you do it intelligently and save money in the process. But they're not the political slogans that help politicians get elected. One, of course, is education. We need to improve the education situation. We have disparities in education, and one of the things, the Brown v. Board of Education decision, one of the phrases in there wasn't just doing away with segregation, but it said that it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity is a right, which must be made available to all on equal terms. Then we set up and funded with the real estate tax, which guarantees it's not going to be equal. And so we passed legislation to try to put money into low-income areas so that low-income children can get a decent education. We are debating right now on the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act, where the money is going to go. And let me tell you, getting the bill passed was a problem because they wanted to take the money from the low-income areas to give it to the wealthy areas. We caught the hand in a cookie jar on that and put the money back where it was supposed to be. But there are other things going on in the implementation that can put a significant amount of money into education. We need early childhood education, elementary and secondary, and also access to college. College is too expensive. The Pell Grants don't cover nearly as much as they used to. States aren't putting the kind of money they are. And a lot of children are concluding they can't afford to go to college.
And Congressman, what about the Parent Plus loan?
Well, the Parent Plus loan was a mistake.
Yeah.
They changed the requirements for Parent Plus loans. 20-some thousand parents, 28,000 parents did not qualify under the new criteria.
If you had any blemish on your credit report.
And what happened was that hundreds of students in each HBCU dropped out. We're trying to get more students in. They're dropping out. The Congressional Black Caucus, every time we talk to the Secretary of Education, those opportunities to talk about your priorities, we spend most of the time talking about Parent Plus loans. And they've improved it a little bit, but haven't fixed it. But we need to make sure that the cost is down. States used to pay about 2/3 of the cost to go into a state college. Pell Grants would cover most of the rest. Now states are putting up about 1/3. Pell Grants haven't come up nearly as much as the tuition, and so people are having to take on mortgage-sized debt in order to go to college. We've got to get it where the states were paying what they should be paying for higher education, and Pell Grants grow to cover most of the rest. Now, again, Mark, this is a priority. There's a proposal out there that was suggested, free public college, and you costed it out at $900 billion over 10 years. $900 billion. Well,
who's going to pay for that, though?
That's a big number. But remember, about 4 years ago, we passed a tax cut where we extended the Bush tax cuts. $3.9 trillion. $900 billion is 0.9. You could have spent free college and had $3 billion left over for tax cuts. It's a matter of priority. And so you've got other suggestions, debt-free college, free community college, with the provision that HBCUs are eligible for the two years. When that was first announced, HBCUs had a problem because people who would have gone to an HBCU to go to free community college, eliminating a lot of students at HBCUs. But there are a lot of things that we can do, a lot of things on the agenda, a lot of things we're debating, and a lot of things that need to be on next year's agenda that we're actually talking about now. And we need to make sure we don't sleep through criminal justice reform, where they pass something that doesn't do anything, or maybe even makes things worse with new mandatory minimums or new expanded mandatory minimums. Don't want to make things worse, but we want to make sure that that debate takes place and that people are paying attention. Evaluate these proposals on what they do on mass incarceration, what they do in terms of the war on drugs, what they do with racial disparities, and whether or not they're just coming up with slogans and sound bites pretending to be policy rather than research and evidence that will reduce crime and save money.
Thank you. Real fast, we have very few minutes left.
I'm going to go really
in this
fast.
segment. So that's, yeah.
I'm going to go really fast. I don't want to lose this point about education, though, right? Because unfortunately, so much of the problem especially around mass incarceration, is started in schools where our children are treated like they are inherently criminal, right? And let's be honest, that's happening in all kinds of schools, right? That's happening in charter schools, it's happening in traditional public schools, it's happening all over the place, right? And our children are internalizing this idea that black is inherently wrong, right? The good news, though, is that in education is where we can also find the solutions, right? So my personal philosophy of education comes from the pedagogy of the oppressed and Paulo Freire, who says that the purpose of education for oppressed people is to free themselves and their oppressor, right? To free themselves and their oppressor. That's young people like Clifton Kinney, who was one of our students who's a Ferguson protester. Deshanya Ware, who started Concerned Student 1950 at Mizzou, who was another one of our students. And the three things that educators really need to pay attention to are these three things, and I promise I'll go very quickly. The first thing is to recognize that our children to look at them not for all of their deficits, but for all of their assets, right? To recognize that they have every bit of power in them that they need to be successful already, and that where they come from matters, right? So we have to hold high expectations of them because we believe in them. The second thing that we have to do, though, is to ensure that we recognize that their culture is also meaningful and not strip who they are for the sake of white supremacy when they step into a classroom, right? And the last point, though, the last point is to treat them like learners and like leaders, and do what Gloria Ladson-Billings talks about, and put academic rigor and academic skill right alongside cultural confidence, knowing and believing in who you are, and cultural consciousness, knowing what's happening in the world and how you can change it, all alongside each other in the classroom.
Really
that's
fast,
what we do.
much shorter. And I'm coming to you guys. I'm coming.
I yield.
You yield? Okay. Let me go back. I promised Jamal. Hold on. Go ahead.
No problem. We need to have a radical shift in how we prioritize policy and investment. From a public health framework, it's rooted in prevention and early intervention. Too much waste and inefficiency is given to downstream implications of shortened life expectancy. When we think about issues around incarceration, we need to shift upstream and all become upstreamists when we think about healthy beginnings for mothers and children. Infant mortality in California, for instance, continues to be a huge issue. In African American communities, it's twice the state average, and particularly in Marin County, an African American baby born in Marin City, in comparison to the Ross community in Marin County, there is a 17-year disparity when we think about comparing it to white children. We need to invest significantly when we think about early education, when we think about ensuring from a healthy beginning standpoint that our mothers and our children have a healthy, strong, nurturing foundation upon which we can begin, because the return on investment is fairly significant. And investing downstream, when we look at disease management models, the return on that investment is totally not in our best interest. And my last comment is the Joint Center on Political and Economic Studies produced a study a couple of years ago that showed between the years of 2003 and 2004, 2006, health inequality in our country for African American, Asian, and Latino communities cost us $1.24 trillion when we think about the implications of health inequality in our society. So early intervention, prevention, going upstream in the life course and in our systems is the best focus that we could have with regard to policy and how we prioritize our investment.
So let me just say,
I'm getting back in line.
Okay.
That's where the investments need to go, prevention and early intervention. That's where you get the best bang for the buck. But we have economics on this part of the segment, and the working families agenda. And as a legislator, I want to just talk about some of the things we're actually considering. The working families agenda to increase wages, which means a significant increase in the minimum wage. Make sure that people can negotiate for their own wages, make sure the wage theft isn't taking place, balancing work and family with family and medical leave, daycare assistance, but also enforcing the 40-hour work week. The Obama administration has regulations to increase the number of people eligible for overtime. It is extremely controversial. They're trying to overturn it, but that will help if you people right now, most people right now, if you work 60 hours a week, you get not only not time and a half for the extra 20 hours, you don't even get time. You just work it for free.
Right.
We need to make sure the 40-hour work week means something,
Right.
and employers will start respecting it so you can go home and be with your family, or if you work 60 hours, you get time and a half for the extra amount. And finally, end discrimination so that everybody gets a fair shot.
Amen.
Though that agenda is part of the Education and Workforce Democratic agenda and needs to be on the agenda for the next administration.
Go, Dr. Abdullah, yeah.
So I just want to roll it back to this question about mass incarceration, right? So it's very important that we pay attention to mass incarceration and the mass criminalization of black people.
That's right.
So it's the mass criminalization, viewing black people as criminals constantly, that led to the death of Terrence Sterling right here in D.C. on September 11th, right? It's the mass criminalization of black people that allows LAPD to kill more people than any other law enforcement unit in the country, including 3 teenagers over a 3-week span. And so we have to be conscious of the ways in which black people are criminalized for being black, and then how that feeds the system of mass incarceration. The second point is that the system of mass incarceration, we have to ask why it exists. As pointed out, it's hugely ineffective. It does not make our communities safer. It's we're spending resources on something that we could much more effectively spend those same resources in ways that actually make communities safe. So why are we spending in the ways that we are? Why are we criminalizing and incarcerating our children at a cost of $200,000 per child per year when we could send 4 of them to Howard University for that price, right? So we need to think about what prisoners are doing all over this country right now. Since September 9th, they have been on strike. Prisoners are being exploited as laborers, as commodities, and as consumers for the benefit of corporate interests. And so we need to begin to dismantle that structure that allows corporations to profit from the incarceration and criminalization of black people and people who become incarcerated.
Yeah, I just wanted, there's been tremendous and incredible comments this morning and a lot of discussion about changing our priorities. So what I want to do is point everyone's attention to the 2016 State of Black America report. At State of Black America online, you can take a look at this report. It chronicles all of the statistics in the areas of education, economics, health, social and criminal justice, and civic engagement. And we have comparisons between blacks, whites, and Latinos across 300 areas to be informed. We also have in here unemployment and income disparity information on the 70 largest cities in America. So you can look at your own hometown and know what the black unemployment rate is, what the white unemployment rate, what is the comparative median income for blacks and whites. And then finally, we have promulgated what we call the Main Street Marshall Plan. It's a call for a commitment of $1 trillion spent over 5 years, a $1 trillion investment to address many of the things we've talked about today. So what we're trying to do, right, is give everybody tools, information, facts, data, and a comprehensive plan, right, that you can take in whole, in part, or create your own version of a plan so that we're talking about the things we want the people who work for us to do. We need to put our activism, our political might, our political will behind bringing about the changes we need. So I wanted to point this out to all of you. The report is free and available to anyone online. It doesn't cost. You don't have to pay for it. Please check it out.
All right, Dr. Malveaux.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mark for the Main Street Marshall Plan, which the Urban League has been pushing for several years, an economic Marshall Plan for our cities, because essentially our urban areas have been consistently neglected. But I wanted to follow up on what Congressman Scott has laid out when he's talked about some of the legislation that Congress has been considering I think that the whole working families agenda is powerful at one level. At another level, I think it's important for us to begin to think forward. Manufacturing jobs are gone. Nobody is going to be able to bring manufacturing jobs back. So I want us to begin to think about what other kind of jobs we'll see in 20 years. Who is going to hold those jobs? How are we going to train people for those jobs? And if we might need to think about a 30-hour week as opposed to a 40-hour week. Because if there's not enough jobs, or if there are not enough jobs to go around, there is always going to be an underclass. And guess who is going to be a part of that underclass? I mean, we don't have to look too far, but in the mirror. And so it's really important for us to begin. We are so afraid of the word socialism that we refuse to do economic planning. And every other industrialized country does economic planning. We look at where people are going to school. We look at what they're majoring in. We say that, all the emphasis on STEM, I love the emphasis on STEM, but if you don't like blood, you can't be a doctor. If you are not mathematical, you can't code. Now, you can be mathematical if you're exposed early. But we want to talk about STEAM also. We cannot ignore the African American contribution to the arts. We can't ignore any number of other things. But what we also cannot ignore is futurism. We need more African American people who are futurists to look at where we're going. And so Congress, I commend the effort to raise the minimum wage. It is absurd that 57% of all African American people earn less than $15 an hour. Let me repeat that. 57% of all African American people earn less than $15 an hour.
And that means they're in poverty. That means they're in poverty.
Well, the poverty level is it's near poverty, near poverty. And even as I talked earlier about the great numbers that we saw that came out on Tuesday, the number of people who live in what's called extreme poverty, half of the poverty line or less, that number has remained constant. There are people, thanks to welfare reform, who do not get a legal dollar in their hand any time of the month. In other words, welfare reform cut people's cash assistance off. Now, they may get a dollar in their hand, and I don't want to know how they got it. But a legal dollar, they are not likely to get their hands on. So you're taking people and putting them into an underground economy, and that then leads you to this mass incarceration because of what Professor Abdullah has said about the presumption of criminalization, which then leads to stop and frisk, and that anybody has Rudy Giuliani. And I'm not calling names. I promised Shawnice Washington I would not curse when I came on that stage. So the Republican candidate for president's name will not pass my lips because that's cursing. But I would say that anybody who has Rudy Giuliani as a spokesperson for their campaign has committed themselves to mass incarceration. So we need to be really clear. Stop and frisk puts us in this cycle. I want to make one more point. I know April is doing such a brilliant job. Before I say anything else, give her a round of applause. See,
You know how to sweep me up so you can get the next one.
and they put me by her because they know I have a big mouth. So you see, she keep putting her hand on me. When I want to jump in, she keeps putting her hand on me. But the final thing, when we talk about this mass incarceration, education, and health, the piece we're missing is the mental health piece that we don't talk about in our community.
Thank you.
I am very concerned about our young brothers and sisters who have been massacred on the street. But I am equally, if not more, concerned about their survivors. I'm concerned about Diamond Reynolds, about what somebody like that does, about whether or not she's going to be able to make that little 4-year-old girl who had the presence of mind to say, "Mommy, I'm here." The woman in Chicago whose son, 16, college-bound, all A's, minding his business, walking the street, is shot. And how her only son, and how she then begins to reconcile that and what she does. And we know that some of the manifestations of ill health in our community are about the manifestations of our illness because we are in an ill place, incarcerated. We are all incarcerated, really. A young man asked me the other day, I think I was talking about how old I was, and he said, "Oh, you so old, did you know any slaves?" And I said, "Baby, I know some slaves right now. They just don't have any chains on." You know.
And on that note, okay, so, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. Knowledge is power. We have I mean, this is a great panel discussion. And once again, the hashtag, I want to see you on the Twitter, breaking it, hashtag CBCFALC16. And all of this that we've been talking about that's on this menu, that's on this plate, is one of the reasons why we come to this point. Voting and civic engagement, the key to lasting change. How many of you plan to vote? I don't see every hand up.
Come on, y'all. Stand up if you don't plan to vote so we can throw stuff at you.
No. Do that now. No. How many of you, okay, and this is a safe room. This is a safe room. I'm from Baltimore. I'll get you if you don't let it be safe. This is a safe room, okay? How many of you plan not to vote? I know you're not going to raise your hand because you're scared.
No, they're not going to raise their hand.
All right. Once again, how many plan to vote? Raise them high.
Hey, I plan to vote twice.
Okay.
April.
At this point, now this is where, and I want to throw this at the panel. People were engaged. African Americans have been engaged, but over the last 2 presidential elections, people have been on fire. That first election, 2, 3, 4 hour waits. We're not hearing about that this election. Why? Is it because the air is being let out of the balloon because the rock star in chief is no longer on the ballot? Is that what it is? What is the problem? Why aren't we engaged? Because as we were saying, we have a lot at what? Stake. Why are we not running to the polls? Especially with the polar opposite ideas and agendas and policy ideas that are on the table. Why aren't we thinking about making sure we grab someone to go to the polls, especially when this is the first time in 50 years that we don't have the full protections of the Voting Rights Act?
Yes.
Especially now. Why aren't we enthused?
I think a key social determinant of health is civic engagement. What happens is we often only see voting as the only way we can truly influence and affect policy and change. I was appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate to my role. We take health equity seriously within the state of California. The reason I bring that up is I testify often at hearings that have huge policy and budgetary implications. We have to change our game beyond just voting and show up in these hearings, and we need to meet with people who represent our interests, because oftentimes from an upstreamist standpoint, by the time we get in the game, as far as how dollars are allocated, land use decisions and such, we've shown up late. And many of the hearings that I go into, like my hearing to be appointed was packed. Folks from the church and people from the community, it was hype. I was excited. But I'll go to a meeting about investing in black infant mortality, or I'll testify in a hearing, and none of us are there.
Hello.
And you have those key beneficiaries who are influencing upstream, who get the money when the decisions are made. And when we find out, because they've gamed the system, that they get the money and the money never gets to our community, that's another way of how we engage civically. So I want us to see this broader spectrum of how we are politically incorporated, not just voting. That's very important, but we need to be actively engaged at each level. Build the capacity of our communities to know how to pick the locks and to change the game as to how dollars are allocated. When we don't want that fast food restaurant, to be put up in our communities, by the time we get in the game and say, no, you won't put that restaurant in my community, it's too late. The decision has already been made. The contracts have been procured. We need to go upstream in the political model, vote, but also show up for hearings, influence the decisions that are made by the people that we elect to represent us in office. And that hugely impacts your health, your mental health, and quality of life.
So, Latanja, talk to me. We were talking about the economics a minute ago of it. And what is the key piece that service employees need to take? I mean, we were talking about wages, minimum wages. There are a lot of people out here that are underpaid who are in the service sector. There are a lot of people who are not just making enough, period, even if they are full-time, making the basic wage. What is at stake for the service employee in this nation?
Well, it isn't just the service employees, it's the home care workers, it's the farm workers, it's the adjunct professors, everyone is at stake. I think that this election is the most important election of our lifetime. However, we cannot just wait for state in on November 8th. We have to keep the drumbeat alive. That's why SEIU members are knocking doors. They're placing calls every day. Last week, we had 10 million people knocking doors. Because you know why? 10,000 people knocking doors. Because we know why? Because we know that unless we are actively engaged at all levels, and we're not just talking about at the White House and the president. We have to be engaged in our communities, and people have to understand the importance of why we need to elect the right school board member, why your state representative is the person that makes a decision about the laws in your community, and why you have to play an active role in making certain the right people are elected in your community. However, we can't just give the issues to people. We have to have that capacity building perspective that Jamal speaks of. We have to educate our people about the importance of engaging themselves in their own lives. We know that there's a wraparound model, that everything that is happening in our communities is not just one thing, it isn't just two things. $15 an hour is just only the start. I think that, there are 18 million workers now that are benefiting because people have taken to the street. The Black Lives Matter has taken to the street. Workers, home care workers, child care workers, restaurant workers, they've all taken to the street and said enough is enough. And we're tired of being resilient because, that's the word that they push out there. We're so resilient. But after so long, resilient becomes oppression. Right. But we have to say enough. And it's up to us to demand change, not only in our criminal justice system, not only and on a political level. We have to demand changes in our community as a whole.
Right. But I think it's important, now let me say, I'm voting before you throw anything at me back to me.
I got some.
But we can't afford, when you talk about the future, we can't afford to shame or overlook this conversation that young people, Black young people in particular, are having about their frustrations with this system.
That's right. Millennials.
Because a lot of them are talking about not voting, not because they're not civically engaged, because I've seen them out there on the protest line, not because they don't know to go to the city council meeting, because they tore up the Ferguson city council meeting, not because they're not willing to run, because they have been running for office. And guess what happened? We got tear gassed August 9th, August 10th, August 11th, and so on, went out, registered people to vote, voted for different candidates, got new people in, and guess what they did a year later? Tear gassed us 20 minutes away from Ferguson in St. Louis when they killed Mansour Balbay, who was unarmed and 18, right? So I can't wing you to the idea of contributing to civic engagement through the ballot box or wherever if I shame you for the reasons why you might be frustrated with it. Because at the end of the day, folks are feeling, young people especially, are feeling like their issues are not being addressed, that they're going to traditional institutions that do not honor gender differences, that do not honor sexuality differences, that ignore the diversity of young people. And so, like I said, I'm voting, but if I'm going to bring young people into this conversation, we can't just say it's ridiculous that you're not going to vote. We have to ask why, and we have to be accountable to them. We have to be accountable to them and ensure that elected officials actually show up and do what they say they're going to do to reinvest them in this.
You have to make them. Elected officials are not going to do a thing.
I agree with you.
Them.
That's why I'm a protester. I agree with you.
Because I have had this conversation with a number of millennials, and I'm finding it extraordinarily frustrating. I'm not going to tell you that you need to vote because somebody died for your vote, because you don't remember that. But what I will tell you is that voting, your civic participation, and it's not an every 4-year or even an every 2-year thing. It's a continual thing.
Yes.
It's something that you have to do all the time. Because if we do the right thing in November, that man over there will be the next United States Senator from Virginia. If we do the right thing, but what I'm willing to say is that the quality of your life, from whether there's a stop sign on the corner in your neighborhood so the cars have to stop so the young people don't get hit, that depends on who you put on the city council. You choose to ignore that, fine. Your child gets hit, you have nothing to say.
Look here.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on. I hear you. Hold on. Okay, wait a minute. Wait. I'm gonna stop this conversation for 1 second. We've got we're going into questions in about 5 minutes. If you have questions, go to that mic. I want to continue the conversation.
Can I finish my point about your school boards, please?
Okay.
Because it's extremely important. In Texas, they call formerly enslaved people. They don't use the word slaves in the textbooks anymore. They say uncompensated employees. Elected school boards make a difference in what kind of books are in your schools. It's not just about the presidential and about and I'm not just saying to you, but if you believe, as you do, Brittany, don't just go to the polls yourself, Brittany. I'm 20 with
And
you.
here's I do, right? No, can I respond though? Because I was addressed.
I mean,
I do.
understand. Let more,
But I also want to listen.
I'm not going to dismiss the notion that some young people are frustrated. You're not the first generation of young people to be frustrated.
Hello.
Nobody is young forever.
But do you think it's some of
So,
it's
number
our
one.
fault,
Number
though?
two.
We didn't.
No.
Do you think some of it's our fault? We didn't let them know.
The idea that some people would not vote, there are people saying, yeah, please don't vote. That's a great strategy. In fact, I remember in 1980, there was an effort going around on black college campuses. I'm not going to call the name of the spokesperson of the movement, who was saying, y'all don't vote. Don't waste your votes. Stay home. We ended up with Ronald Reagan. We have to be, am I going to say vote because somebody died for you? I'm not going to say it, but yes, I'm going to say it. Because it's real to understand that voting is a responsibility. It's not like buying ice cream. It's not like texting somebody. It's not a call on a cell phone. And for 400 years, we didn't have the right to vote. I'm from the South. My grandparents, my mother was turned away to register to vote for the first time in the 1950s when they asked her, ma'am, what color are your eyes? She said, my eyes are brown. They said, no, your eyes are black. You flunked the test.
So if
I want to make this point. I want to make this point because I think I acknowledge, but it is not a viable strategy for black people to withdraw from voting.
Right.
It's a strategy
The Voting Rights Act,
if you have that conversation.
The Voting Rights Act was started because of the South.
This is important too, because I've been, wait a minute. I have been on both sides of this. I've been an elected official. I've been a civil rights leader. I was a young person in the 1980s that marched, that protested, that got arrested at the South African embassy. And I am one that believes that all forms of political activism is what we need.
Right. Yeah.
We do need protest. We do need voting.
Right.
We do need public policy advocacy. Yeah. We shouldn't get into an intellectual debate about one strategy or another. We need every tool to slay the dragon of oppression in America.
Now let Dr. Abdallah say, because we have a few seconds. Go ahead.
So, if I could just say this, I know we're putting a lot of pressure, especially on young people, to vote and saying that it's your responsibility to vote. And I will be voting. I may not be voting for the candidates that they tell us we have.
That's fine, but you're voting.
Vote for who you want.
But I think that it's really important that we understand that just as we're saying young people have a responsibility to vote and people have a responsibility to vote, those who are deciding who runs for office has a responsibility to run better candidates. How about that?
People have a responsibility to step up and run.
Run for office.
If you run
for office.
have a responsibility.
They've been running all over the country.
This is hot.
That I think it's really important that when we talk about, who we absolutely cannot have in this presidency, that we also have to recognize it's very hard to win enthusiasm, the enthusiasm of folks who are based on a lesser of two evils model. That's right. And so we have to evolve. We have to evolve people. That might not be popular in this room, but it's the truth.
All right.
The second point that needs to be made is that we cannot summarize civic participation by voting. Right? Voting is not the only form of civic engagement, and I think the point that Brittany was making is that young people especially have been extremely civically engaged.
That's
We
right.
go to every single
That's
police
right.
commission meeting.
Right.
We go
But
to
they were
every
civically
single
engaged in the
city
civil rights
council
movement as
meeting.
well.
We
Young
hold
people
our
lead the
elected
movement.
officials.
Young people lead the movement.
Is
And that is
around the
our
globe. Young
civic
people
engagement.
are
the
and we
key.
need to lift that up. And instead of sitting here and criticizing young people and
How
saying,
was
"You're
that?
not
No one's
doing
criticized young
Can I finish
people,
my point,
but no
please?
one's criticized
Young
young
people led the
people.
Instead of
most successful movement in this
criticizing
nation, the
people,
civil rights
criticize
movement.
young people.
Instead of, I'm not
Nobody's
talking,
criticized.
this is not personal.
Okay, well, hold on for a
I'm not
minute.
taking it personally.
This is not.
Okay, we can agree to disagree. Let's have civility. We are not going to move forward if it's not civil. Hold on, we're not going to move forward if it's not civil.
Uplift the role that young people have been playing of holding elected officials accountable and saying you have to do more than, speak a rhetoric of liberalism. You have to actually do something for our.
Okay, I'm going to go to Congressman.
I think we can all acknowledge that voting will not solve all our problems. We're not going to solve any of these problems unless we vote.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court said a long time ago that any right you have is illusory if the right to vote is undermined. If you set up and elect the wrong people, then they are the ones to make the decision. If you look in Ferguson, I think they learned this lesson. Ferguson, a city about 2/3 black, you could count the number of black police officers on one hand. They woke up after Michael Brown was shot, and they voted. They threw out the mayor, threw out the chief of police,
they didn't.
and
The
one of the local prosecutors is gone. And now you have different people making the decisions. Now,
Yeah, and
the next step is to hold those new people accountable so they do the right thing. If they don't, then throw them out.
That's the
But
point.
you're not getting
frustrated, so I'm
any of
gonna
these
be
things
upset.
solved without voting. Now, as a legislator, again, we're trying to fix this on the federal level. The Voting Rights Act was sabotaged by the Supreme Court. We need to reinstate the power of Section 5 to make sure that none of these voting schemes get enacted while nobody's looking. We need to make sure, again, you need to elect the right people because redistricting can actually elect people. In Virginia, we have every statewide official in Virginia is a Democrat. Obama carried it twice, 2 U.S. senators, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all Democrats. And you look at the congressional delegation, 8 Republicans, 3 Democrats. None of the last election, none of the elections were close. Now, we've redistricted since then, but a lot of the states are in the same position. So you need to make sure that as a first step, you vote. And it's up to us to make sure that we convince young people and explain to them why that's so important. But if people stop voting, none of these problems.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry. Thank you, Congress. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Dr. Menademse, head up the Policy Analysis Department at the Foundation. I want to say, and I've done this for many years, this is actually the kind of conversation that we do need, a very real conversation where we're not just talking about voting, but what we're doing pre and post the vote. And I think that's what Dr. Molina and our sister Brittany Packnett are mentioning. So voting is critical. What we're missing is what we're voting for and what we're doing in off-season elections, right? So let's continue this conversation because it's a very real one, probably one of the more authentic conversations, and so we need to have these nuances be told. While I'm talking, I'd like to invite Professor Funmilola Fagbamila, who will make her way to the stage. She's going to make brief remarks, and then we're going to turn to Q&A. Before that, I want to acknowledge several folks in the audience. We have the grandson of Nelson Mandela here with us.
Gosh.
If he could please stand, Ndaba Mandela. Thank you. He was with us last year. We also have Ethiopian students who have come from Israel, who are here from the Holocaust Museum. We have 45 Richmond Public High School students, if they can please stand. Young people trying to be active, here to vote. All right. Representing the state from Congressman Scott. Also from the UC Washington Center and also the National Election Defense Coalition, who will be hosting a voter protection series tomorrow with Congressman Conyers, Reverend Barber, and you'll get those flyers later. I'd like now to introduce to you Professor Funmilola Fagbamila. Where is my sister? Come on over here. She is a scholar, activist, playwright, and artist. Having recently completed her graduate program at UCLA in Black Studies, Fumilola now serves as professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. As an original member of the Black Lives Matter movement, she has been organizing with BLM since its inception in 2013. In 2015, Fumilola was honored by the United States Congress and the Black community, clergy, and labor alliance for her commendable activist scholarship, service, and struggle. She frequently sits on community panels regarding police brutality, criminal justice, and overall wellness in Black communities, most recently presenting at a conference held by the UCLA School of Law. She's going to make comments, start a question, and then all of the sisters and brothers behind me, please keep your questions short and sweet to the point so we can get as much dialogue. Fumilola, give her a hand, please.
Okay, this was a great conversation. I'd like to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for inviting me to come and contribute to the conversation briefly with some remarks. I'd like to thank Melina Abdullah as well for inviting me too. So this was interesting. I am listening to your conversation and how this debate gets heated about how important voting is and this concept of how we define civic engagement. But first I want to talk about a lecture that I recently gave at UCLA about the inception of the Black Lives Matter movement and the work that BLMLA is doing. So a student asked a question. She said, you know, Fumilola, this is very interesting. I appreciate the work that you're doing with BLM. I appreciate the work that Black Lives Matter LA is doing, but I'm not quite sure where the accountability piece comes in because you all are not talking about black on black crime. And I think that that's interesting because that is oftentimes a critique, right, of young activists that are doing this work, that are actually putting their lives on the line and coming out and protesting, that we have no critique of quote unquote black on black crime. And I bring that up to say that oftentimes when this conversation comes up, that I would say that it's ideologically lazy at best to bring this up as a diversion to a conversation to anti-black state violence, and violent at worst to actually bring this up. And so when we say that young black people that are on the street engaging in they're doing their own type of a civic engagement, are not critiquing our own ways in which we engage our communities, I think that that's absolutely false. That actually what we're doing is we're reframing and understanding structurally and institutionally how historically when poverty goes up, crime goes up. When poverty goes down, crime goes down right along with it. And so we're understanding the ways in which systematically black on black crime, quote unquote, has been upheld in that, and that when we talk about black on black crime and all of these concepts, we don't also talk about the fact that this is not an actual and true real phenomenon. It's been phrased this way. All races, white people harm white people and kill white people in their own communities. And other people of color do this too, but we have not been trained and socialized to pathologize the way that other races engage each other.
And thank you for that.
Trained to pathologize blackness.
Thank you so much for your.
Okay.
We have to get to the next, to the questions because we have
appreciate
gone.
it.
But thank you so much for that. Thank you. All right, now here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do with the questions. And we're going to keep this civil, okay? Because I already see there's some very anxious questioners, and the crowd is anxious in some areas. I want you to ask your question, pass the mic off, and sit down, and we will give it, you'll ask whoever you want, but we're going to ask one question, and then we're going to move on, okay?
I will not do that because I will not agree with your entitlement that has just gone on the last 20 minutes.
Okay, well, sir, I am sorry.
Excuse me, ma'am, I have the mic at this time, and I'm going to ask my question.
Wow. Okay, sir, well, this is a CBC event, sir. I'm sorry, they asked me to moderate, and they just cut your mic off. All right, so I'm going to go to the panel. Congressman Bobby Scott. What is there to lose? I know, but he's not giving her the mic. He's not giving up the mic. Okay, ma'am,
Give him a minute to ask his question.
Let him ask his question. Okay, I didn't turn the mic off. But I didn't turn the mic off.
Just yell your
Can
question.
you ask the question, sir? Just ask your question. I don't have control of your mic, sir. I'm not doing any censoring. I didn't shut your mic off. Okay, so while we're waiting for this situation to happen,
we're not waiting.
Congressman,
I will ask the question.
Well, go ahead.
It's on, I think. I think it's on.
Turn the mic on. Just let the brother answer.
First and foremost, giving honor to Almighty God
amen.
and our noble ancestors. Yes. Those who are in this audience who are over 70 years of age, may I have the opportunity to continue to speak. Thank you. The question, if I have a question, is where is your Constitution of the United States of America in your pocket that you can know the 13th Amendment and you can know the other amendments? But the question that I ask is the person who talked about the upstream. Dr. Francis Chris Wilson gave us the 9 areas of human activity. 3 of them real quickly. Education, economics, I will, as well as entertainment. Where is our salad bowl? We do not have, how do we create a salad bowl approach with the order of priorities with upstream as well as midstream as well as downstream? And how can we stop arguing over trifle things and deal with the salad bowl as a whole? My name is Oduno Tariq, and I represent the Nanny Helen Burroughs Project.
Thank you so much. Congressman, I think you would be great to answer that one since you are currently sitting.
I think he's pointed out the fact that there's no one solution to all these problems. When you start talking about crime reduction, we know how to reduce crime, but it has to be a comprehensive approach, starting very early, comprehensive, making sure that you have early childhood education, after-school programs, I mean a combination of things so that you get children out of the cradle-to-prison pipeline and into a cradle-to-college and career pipeline. We know how to do it. We know it works. We know it saves more money than it costs, but it's a matter of priorities, and it's a matter of holding politicians accountable because, frankly, it's easier to get elected by spouting out a bunch of slogans and sound bites rather than the hard work of sitting down, doing the public health approach that we know actually will reduce crime and save money, save lives, and put people into a cradle-to-college and career pipeline.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Joyce Harris. I'm from Portland, Oregon. And there was a situation in this line here. So I'm just going to ask one question. How do we authentically, honestly embrace and engage our young people across the spectrum? And I'm going to just do this. I'm going to turn it over to these 2 young people who are behind me. They were gracious enough to let me go first.
Oh, that's nice.
But I'm going to let them go. And I've been wanting to do this since I was 18 years old. Power to the people.
Hey!
Especially black young folks.
That's
All
right.
right, that answers the question.
I mean, part of it is what you just did. Thank you for that question. Part of how we authentically engage young people is what you just did, to hand over the space, right? And to allow for true authentic listening.
Right.
And that's really the point that I was making earlier, right? Because my point ultimately wasn't about the voting booth or not the voting booth. My point ultimately was about us ensuring that we create space that welcomes and is inclusive of all young people.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, when we protested, they told us we were too loud. When we protested, they told us we played the wrong songs, that we dressed too weirdly, that we had too many gay folks and transgender folks out there. If we keep having these conversations in churches or in ways that are condescending and in places that don't include all young people, we will not convince young people or engage them in anything. So my only point, and my point then and my point now, is simply about being inclusive. And I think that that's the way that we truly and authentically engage with young people, when we affirm who young people are and we make sure to include them in the conversation.
But I think at the same time, sister, with all due respect, I mean, I appreciate and co-sign everything you said, but I think with all due respect, engaging and listening goes 2 ways.
It does.
I mean,
It does.
I am about tired of being called a dinosaur by young people, told that I'm not hip because I can't twit, which I can. But I think
It's
that
not what they call you, what you answer to.
I think that we can all learn from each other.
Yes.
And as Mark said earlier,
Certainly agree with that.
we were 20-something marching with cray clothes and cray music and platform shoes up to there and skirts down there and whatever. We were doing the same thing, and we feel you.
All
I
right.
also think that we don't build community unless we hear each other.
I agree.
And what I'm hearing from a lot of the younger folks is they don't want to hear it. They just want to tell. You won't listen to me.
I want to
You
get
won't
more
listen to me.
questions. I want to get more questions. One question, one answer, one question, one answer. Go, ma'am.
I just wanted to echo what the beautiful woman in the burgundy said, that we do have to talk about crimes within the community, because I'm from California and there seems to be a really hard time talking about trans women, black trans women, and the violence they endure. And I think it's because a lot of the violence they endure are from men of color. And it's been really frustrating from LA to the Bay trying to get our racial justice activists and leaders to be consistent. We had an event in LA where we were talking about hate crimes against black trans women, and none of the black leaders showed up. So my question is, how do we engage black trans people to vote when it doesn't really seem like a lot of our black leaders are really showing up for us?
You know what, Muriel, what do you think about that?
I've often believed, and my experiences were taking over a community in 1994, becoming the mayor of New Orleans, where we had 425 murders a year. We had a police brutality problem and a police corruption problem that was awful. I'd like to think that if we frame it in the context of the cycle of violence, you see, violence begets violence. And the violence that we carry out on each other, the violence that people carry out on each other, is also a byproduct of state-sponsored violence. It's a byproduct of violence we see promoted on television. It has its legacy in depression. All of these things are related. It's the industry of pilfering our community with easy access to guns. It's the illegal drug trade that takes place in our community. All of this is fueling, and I do believe that it's important, those of us that talk about justice, those of us that talk about racial justice, to not dismiss the idea that violence by us, against us, is also a challenge that we have to confront. And I don't think we should be afraid to talk about it. The reason why is this, a victim of violence, whether it's a woman who's been abused, whether it's a young man that's been shot, whether it's a person who's been beat up by the police, is a person that's been violent, who's been murdered. They've been violated. And we need to demonstrate a sense of compassion and a sense of concern for them from a human point of view. And so I've always believed that this violence is a vicious cycle that swirls together and that swirls with each other, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it from a justice standpoint.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, Isaac Ricard, Texas Bigger Better Business Director of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. My question is simply this. It's gone from an external point to now an internal cultural point. In Dallas, Texas, we are dealing with many, many challenges, just like anywhere else in the nation. But one thing that I could tell in this room, and yes, my question has changed. One thing I can tell in this room is that we have a challenge or almost a struggle between the old guard and the new guard of young professionals, politicians, cultural leaders. And I'm curious, what can we do to almost breach this gap so we're not fighting each other, but coming together to create solutions, creating a pipeline of leadership that you, the seasoned veterans have told us you want? How can we bridge that gap so we can get more involved in an effective way?
Brother, I didn't start out seasoned, I mean,
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, the intergenerational friction, tension is nothing new. Nothing new. It was a part of the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And, I got my start in activism when I was very young, political activism, student activism, protest politics on campus when I was very young. I think that Julianne said it best, that if you have dialogue, has to be a two-way street. And maybe what we have to do is be willing to listen to each other. But also, I embrace the idea. Young people, you should run for public office. You should be involved in protest politics. You should be involved in going to community meetings. You should be involved in the entire spectrum of civic engagement. What I fear is people sitting on the sidelines, doing nothing, being observers, simply watching. Get involved and get engaged.
All right, great. We need shorter answers from the panel and shorter questions from the questioners. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I'm the criminal justice chair for the Connecticut NAACP, and I don't have so much of a question, but an appeal to Congressman Scott and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who I see has just come in. We need to hold our justice departments accountable. In the state of Connecticut, the NAACP gave the Justice Department 60 egregious civil rights complaints. And they closed those cases without investigating. We confirmed because they never talked to the complainants. That was in 2011. When I made an appeal through the Inspector General and the U.S. Attorney's Office, they reopened it in late 2011. And as of this day, they're not telling me anything about the investigations, and they say because of confidentiality, they can't discuss it. But again, confidentiality in these cases are cover-ups for what they're not doing. We need to hold our justice departments accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
How are you doing? My name is Isaac Mance with Mobile Like Me, and all you guys have talked about accessing the internet, whether tweeting, whether looking at things on the internet, and the reality is blacks are 4 times less likely to have internet access at home than our white counterparts. So I want to see, one, what can we do to close the digital divide, especially as it applies to accessing the internet through our cell phones or mobile devices, which is what our community does. Thank you.
I guess legislatively?
Legislatively or
Well, I think it's also a matter of raising awareness. I do think legislatively it makes a difference. We also find that less access in rural areas, and we disproportionately are in those rural areas, and I think Congress has done something.
Well, if you're talking about access, we're funding access to broadband in rural areas. That's just an investment in an infrastructure. There's not enough of it. You've got a lot of areas with no connectivity at all. There are a lot of programs in schools that encourage the devices. I know there's a school in Norfolk where they were able to get mini pads for all the students in the school. You have to just keep pushing them. It costs money. There are also programs where you can get inexpensive internet connectivity through your cable systems. All of these need to be pushed. If it takes tax incentives, it takes laws. We're pushing in that direction to have 100%, just like you have telephones. Just about everybody at one time had a landline. Now it's people are giving up their landlines, going to just cell phones. But that was a policy decision that we wanted 100% coverage of landlines. And we got there. We could have 100% connectivity, so everybody is connected to the internet and will have access to the information.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Jordan. I'm a graduate of Delaware State University and HBCU, and Black Lives Matters is something I'm very passionate about. My question is for Ms. Packnett. It seems the Black Lives Matters movement focuses on police brutality, protesting, and hashtags, but seems not to focus on black economics, supporting black businesses, financial responsibility, healthy living, and supporting the black nuclear family, which is mother, father, and child. I just want to ask what are your thoughts about that and things we can do along those lines to progress this.
Thank you. So the movement broadly has always been clear that police violence is a branch of a tree rooted in systemic racism and oppression, and the work is to uproot the whole tree, not just break the branch. We've always been very clear about that. You can look at Campaign Zero, you can look at the Movement for Black Lives and see very clearly stated policy platforms. And I want to be very clear that we are unapologetically creating policy platforms that are inclusive of everyone, which means every kind of family, which means every kind of sexuality, which means every kind of gender identification, because the fact of the matter is we're not single issue people, right? We're not a monolithic people. And if we're not going to include all black people, then that's not a movement I want to be a part of. This woman's got the mic.
Okay.
This woman's got the mic.
My name
Thank
is
you.
Joyce.
Okay, civil, thank you. Okay.
My name is Joyce Parker, and I'm from Greenville, Mississippi, with a community-based organization there that represents parents and students around education. But also I'm here now with a national coalition called Dignity in Schools Campaign, and we give a shout out to you, Legislator Scott, because in the early days you were there meeting with us and having conversations. When I see these young people stand up, I'm really concerned. You really are probably an exception to the rule, not necessarily the rule when it comes to Teach for America, the way we see it in our communities. We've got to connect the dots. The environment that our children are when they go into a school building is really horrific in so many ways. And the things that you all have lifted up speaks to it. And from the health from New Orleans, we've got 1033 that New Orleans got 6 pages of hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent in bringing military weapons into our schools, not just our communities, but into our schools. I want to know, how are we going to connect the dots for these young people where they will want to be an educator? That's a profession. But in terms of you, and it's really not personal, I'm really impressed when you all talk about the monies. I have a niece that just went freshman at Jackson State University. Her mom took out a $15,000 loan. And I'm like, God, it's a house note. And I don't think she really understands it. And I don't understand it enough either to tell her. But our children, and I don't know, these may go to college, but so many of our children in our communities are getting lost with all of this zero tolerance policies and practices. So in terms of school climate for ESSA, we really need to ask you, what are you all looking at in terms of that rolling out? We cannot have a hands-off approach.
Thank you.
That's my question.
Thank you so much.
So I don't know if you're able to say, I would love to follow up with you, because quite frankly, I just want to hear from you. We can't pretend like we haven't made mistakes in education work, period. So I'm not here to be defensive. What I'm here to do is listen to you, to tell you that the approach to culturally responsive pedagogy that was created by Gloria Ladson-Billings is not just something that we use in my region in St. Louis. We actually use it all across the organization because we've learned from those mistakes, which is why I need to continue to hear your feedback. But ultimately, what you said is exactly right. Our children need our affirmation, they need our love, they need opportunities for leadership like this. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that all children are able, especially black children, are able to access that wherever they are. So I'd love to continue to talk.
The pipeline, can I just quickly comment on that? There's a huge demographic disconnect in all of our institutions. So when we have 18% of preschoolers that are African American, but 48% of our preschoolers that are suspended in preschool are African American girls and boys. The problem with that, when we think about the pipeline, is that if it's stifled that early in the life course, they're not feeding into the workforce development piece as far as who are going to be the police officers, who are going to be the teachers, who are going to be the principals, who are going to be the doctors. So it's important. Educational attainment is huge, and we have to go upstream to ensure that administrators, teachers are not unjustly disciplining, our children, because it literally stifles our pipeline.
And just very briefly, tracking that is part of the Every Student Succeeds Act. You have to track the disproportionate numbers. It's also in juvenile justice bill that we just reported yesterday. You have to track disproportionate minority contracts so that, unless you're counting it, you can't manage it.
Exactly.
Next question, thank you.
My name is Polite Davis. I'm with the Richmond Richmond Public Schools. I go to Armstrong High School. I'm just want to ask, where's the assurance? Where's the promise in all this? You guys talk about education, incarceration, the black people getting killed, but where's the promise that these acts, laws are going to get passed, are going to come to life? Like, I honestly don't see it happening. Y'all sitting here talking to us. I do not see anything happening. We just you talking to us. It's 4 days for this seminar. There's 3 days left. Do you know what can happen in 4 days? You already said what can happen in a year. Just a portion of those deaths can happen in 4 days. I just want to know, where's the promise? Where's the assurance?
Can I ask you something? Hold on. Have you lost someone?
Yes, I have.
Put your mic. You put your mic.
Yes, I have.
Who did you lose?
I lost my baby cousin.
Thank you, sir.
Brother, there is not going to be any insurance. With all due respect, there won't be insurance because we cannot insure anything except for the fact that people are committed activists. We can ensure that we struggle with the system and we try to not tweak it, but transform it. I mean, I think the challenge with legislation is too often we're just tweaking a little bit here, tweaking a little bit there. Really what we're looking for is societal transformation, but there are no guarantees. We had an African-American president, but I wrote a book called Are We Better Off? Because it is a question. Because we did not make President Obama step to us all the time. We have to make leaders do their work. They're not going to do it just because they are essentially well-intentioned. They have to be pushed. I'm willing to work with you. I think anyone here would be willing to work with you, but we can't guarantee you anything.
So, young brother, let me say I believe there is an assurance. I believe the assurance is us.
Right.
We always win.
Right.
It doesn't always feel like we winning, but we win as long as we struggle. Right? So when you stand up, and it doesn't mean that there's no losses in the struggle. There are going to be losses and horrific losses, and I'm so, so sorry for your loss. But we win when we struggle. So get with folks. If you're in D.C., my D.C. BLM folks are right here. Get with them. We're going to struggle together and we're going to win. Black people always win. We freed ourselves from slavery, right? We ended the first wave of lynching. We won civil rights. We won voting rights. We proudly proclaim Black power. We win when we struggle with us. We are the leaders we've been waiting for.
All right, okay.
But what we
thank you,
can't
thank
do
you.
is give up. We can't give up.
Right.
We have to continue fighting.
Okay, thank you. Listen, we got 3 more people. We got to do it really fast because our time we have gone overtime. Thank you, sir. Fast.
Joel Siegel, former senior legislative assistant, Representative John Conyers, Dean of the Congress. And thank you so much, CBCF, for the brilliance on this panel. The question I have is for Mark Morial. Is there any way you could do a national conference on your Marshall Plan idea? I am the national director of a Green Jobs program. We need a national conference so we can all come together and implement your plan, and Hillary Clinton needs to run on it right now.
Let's talk about that because we're looking to elevate the plan as much as we can. And the plan is inspired by the ideas of many. We don't own the ideas. We just try to assemble the ideas into a coherent plan. Talk about how we need to change our priorities. And it goes to the thinking that I always have, that you've got to have a plan, whether you call it a set of demands, something to advocate specifically for. So I'd love to work with you because I think we got to focus on the economic issues, right? The poverty, the unemployment, the underemployment, the workforce issues, how people, right? We can get people with more money in their pockets, people with more self-sustainability in their lives. So I look forward to working with you and talking to you about whether we could find a way to put something together.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate, once again, you guys coming through. My name is Tim Moorhead. I'm nothing more than simply a sinner redeemed by the grace of Jesus Christ. So I come to you all humbly. I just really want to know, based on the, I don't even know how to put this really, but
we need
the pressure. No, I will put it. The pressure that we need to put on our next president, I think, should be a concrete measure that's taken, and I think it should be taken as forcing the next candidate to have Black Lives Matter as a platform issue. And I think a platform issue is significant because we've seen Barack Obama in the past 8 years. He's established his platform issues and he's delivered on everything that he said was a platform issue. So if we have mass incarceration and the end of police brutality as a platform issue, we can hold the presidential candidate accountable for that. What is the likelihood of us doing that?
Don't answer yet. Let's get this last one in.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Darnley Howard. I'm a management consultant.
My question, first of all, I have to note that I see no business people on the panel, so I will add
Mark
this.
Morial, Urban League, their business economics.
What is the legislative agenda for supporting black business, economic development, and generally black ownership of assets?
Can I respond to the first question?
Yes.
I came from the private sector, got appointed to this position. I am working within an institution that historically has contributed to many of the disparities and inequities that we see, but I'm not institutionalized. I think we need to put ourselves in the position to be pressured and forced, because when we move forward with these platforms and these priorities, we need to be in the position to influence where the dollars go, how the policies are implemented. What happens now is many of the policies and the dollars are implemented by people who are culturally incongruent and have a disconnect with who we are. So we need to position ourselves to say that it's okay for us to work to change these institutions, but not become institutionalized. And that can happen within the executive branch, the legislative branch, on the local level, in so many different ways, being appointed to commissions and boards and things of that nature. So we have to position ourselves as best as possible to influence the real kind of change that we want to see. And I think that's a big component of
Thank you.
what we're talking
Let me just say, one of the things that's at stake in this election is the Supreme Court. We've got one nomination pending. They've got 3 additional judges in their late 70s. If you're in business, you know the law on affirmative action. I'm from Richmond. The Croson decision came out of Richmond, where you're trying to make sure that minority businesses got a fair shot. Supreme Court ruled against that plan. The rule under affirmative action will be determined by essentially determined by the next president, because those 3 or 4 appointments will be setting the law of the by the Supreme Court for the next 20 years as a vote, 30 or 40 years after that as precedents. If things go wrong and you get the wrong people on the Supreme Court, the next 3 or 4 justices, you're going to have a generation of decline in the Supreme Court's even allowing affirmative action in contracting. So that's just one way that this campaign is extremely important for minority business.
Yeah, Darlene, good to see you. Read the Main Street Marshall Plan. We have a number of planks in here about small business financing and about increasing the commitment of the federal government to increased opportunities for African American small businesses and small businesses owned by all people of color. The second thing I would say is that what the recession did to us is we lost 50% of our wealth. African Americans lost 50% of our wealth. And the black home ownership rate, which was almost at 50% about 10 years ago, is on its way down to 40%. So this is all about banks. This is all about Fannie Mae. This is about all the institutions. We've got to keep this issue of rebuilding our wealth, which was primarily through the ownership of the homes that we lived in. That's where our wealth really was. On the agenda for the next Congress and the next president of the United States. So the Main Street Marshall Plan has planks that address both of these issues. So again, I'd recommend the State of Black America 2016 to everyone.
Wow. This has been amazing. We've gone through the highs and the lows just in these few hours. Wow, thank you. I want to thank
April.
Thank you. I want to thank Congressman Bobby Scott, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, Brittany Patnett, Lataj Sylvester, Dr. Melina Abdullah, Mark Morial, and Jamal Miller. And I'm April Ryan. Thank you so much to all our panelists and to the audience. And we want to continue to continue this discussion. I'm tongue-tied. You guys made me so today. To continue this discussion, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, in collaboration with Representative John Conyers, the Judiciary Brain Trust, the Congressional Voting Rights Caucus, and the Voting Rights Alliance will host the 2016 Voter Protection Series. Many of our most outspoken leaders will be a part of this discussion. The Voter Protection Series will happen tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Once again, tomorrow at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. we will have a panel discussion about the federal case for voter protection and the Voting Rights Act. And from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., we will discuss the state battle for voter protection All are invited. Again, all of you are invited. Both panels will happen in room 147B. Again, the voter protection series will happen tomorrow, Friday, September 16th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. here in the Convention Center in room 147B. If there are any new voters for the upcoming election, please visit the voter registration tables outside this room where you can register to vote this November. If you are not registered, go outside this room and register. It's important. We just talked about it. It's a must to give a special thanks to Ben Pashnik and the National Election Defense Coalition for their partnership in this effort. And with that, I want to bring up one of our fearless and tireless leaders in Congress who has the last word about what to say and what's at stake for the upcoming election and the next administration and the kind of moving we must build to go forward. Please welcome to the stage, he's right behind me, Congressman, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me first say good morning to all of you and thank you so very much for joining us for the 2016 Annual Legislative Conference National Town Hall Meeting. We work very hard each year to put this town hall meeting together, and I thank you for responding. I want you to differentiate between the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Even though we have a serious family relationship between these two entities, we are indeed separate. By law, we have to be separate. The Congressional Black Caucus consists of 48 African Americans who serve in the United States Congress. 46 choose to belong to the CBC. One of those 46 is a Republican from Utah. The other consist of 45 Democrats from 22 states all across the country, including the District of Columbia and the Virgin Islands. Collectively, we represent more than 30 million people. And so I'm delighted to be here today on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus to thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for its incredible work and its willingness to continue to sponsor this annual legislative conference. I thank you for joining this conversation today. I want to thank the panelists for their incredible participation in this discussion. We in the Congressional Black Caucus are continuing to grow our numbers. You should know that. You should know that I told you we have 46 members in the caucus. We are not going to have a representative next year from Harlem because Congressman Rangel is retiring and we did not succeed in electing a replacement in Harlem. So that number will go to 45. That is the bad news. But the good news is that we've picked up a seat in Orlando, Florida. That's 46. Picked up one in Richmond, Virginia, 47. One in Delaware, 48. One in Los Angeles, California, 49. And probably a United States Senator from California. That will be 50. We will break 50 in 2016. And the big secret, if you will keep it in this room, and I know you will, Tim Kaine will probably be the next Vice President of the United States of America. And we're going to urge the governor of Virginia to appoint an African American to the United States Senate from the Commonwealth of Virginia. And he may be sitting on this stage right now. You may figure that out in a few minutes. We take very seriously this time to come together, to dialogue, to define this moment of challenge and opportunity, and to build a movement in which we drive our agenda, the CBC agenda. I want to confess to you that we cannot do it without you. We cannot do it without you. Your participation matters. We will lead, we will serve, but so must you. We must all act in a unified and strategic way. And so I'm very proud to be a part of this conversation today that is facilitating that opportunity this weekend. I'm proud that my colleagues have joined us and that they are willing to do it. I see the vice chair of the foundation board, my esteemed colleague, Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank her for being here. She's everywhere. Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. But it's important that, I was backstage listening. I wasn't back there just eating bagels. I was listening to every word that was being said. I was eating a bagel, though. But I heard the brother in the end say that we must force the next president to embrace Black Lives Matter. You're spot on. And that's what we've been talking about for the last several weeks or months in the Congressional Black Caucus meetings. We cannot give a pass to anyone who becomes president of the United States. We have already started dialoguing with the transition representatives for the campaign. And I can tell you that our point of view will be included not only in the first 100 days of the new administration, but our agenda, which is part of the Black Lives Matter agenda, will be front and center of this effort. It will happen. It will happen. This is a critical time, as ever, for us to take action. We came together 8 years ago to elect the first African-American president. We came together to do a whole lot of things, to end slavery, to pass the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Act. We've come together on many occasions, and we have confronted the enemy, and we have succeeded. We will do it again. We absolutely must exert the same energy and enthusiasm that we have done in those movements, and so that we can continue our forward progress. But you know, and I know, and we can't get political during this week because this is a foundation, this is a 501c3. We can get political, we can't get partisan, okay. But you know, and I know that there are some serious forces at work right now as we speak in this country. And you've got to know it, you've got to understand it, and you've got to be prepared to join us and us join you in helping to defeat the enemy. And so while we're contributing our talents and our resources and our votes to making that happen, we must be clear, unequivocal, and assertive regarding our agenda, which reflects the dreams and hopes of our constituents. That is why this panel today was so important. What you shared in the session and in others throughout the weekend is valuable. You have given us new and interesting insights that we can take back to Congress and to the new administration that we will elect. Thank you for participating. I hope you're able to continue this conversation with us tomorrow. There are tables right outside, as April said a moment ago, and thank you, April, for all that you do. There are tables right outside this room to register to vote, and I'm making an assumption that everybody in here is registered to vote. But just in case you're not registered to vote, don't tell anybody. Just go over to the table and register to vote. If you are not registered, I urge you to do so today. God bless you. Thank you for coming. This has been a wonderful event. Thank you.